Okay, guys, while we are checking on the number of attendees, I think we should start to give, not to waste your time on a Saturday. And, you know, yes, Mamta, I agree. I might have overlooked this because of some, I've also been rusted. So probably forgot to check about that. But yes, I can see it's capped to 100. And what I can do is I can change this. I have set this up as a meeting. I have to just change it to a webinar. If someone just another give me another 2 minutes. Okay, anyways, let me start, guys. We'll yes, I'm recording the session, Ayushi, so that I'll share after the session. So it would be helpful for all of you. And I'm very sorry to those who could not join. I think I need to take these small issues into care from the next week onwards when we start going full-fledged into topic-wise webinars for you guys to attend. Sorry for that, but request you guys to not get dropped off. Otherwise, it would be difficult for you to come back. Um, Internet connection can be the only issue, but that can't be helped. So, anyways, 100 is good enough, good number for to see after a month's time. If you guys remember, whosoever had joined me in the last session in March, that I thought it was, I mean, next week is Holy long weekend, and after that there is a Good Friday long weekend. So let's do some webinars quickly, and then because we'll again see each other by mid of April. But then I had this, if you remember, options premium classes on 10th and 11th April, which went pretty well. We had 25 attendees, and the feedback was great. It was the first time that I was taking such a large, large number of audience for an option class, because options I really want derivatives to be taught in a very focused manner. That was the time when my mom became positive, and after that I just lost the touch. Health issues were there in the family. So father was fine, wife was fine, but then I got into some kind of a kidney issues, renal infection, for which I'm still recovering. Voice is something which could be well heard, and see that I'm not in a great shape, but then I thought the show must go on, because this is not COVID that in 14, 15 days I'm all right and back on feet. This will continue. So meanwhile, there have been little updates from my side. As you guys know, would have seen on the LinkedIn, I quit Edelweiss somewhere in the middle of April. On my last day at Edelweiss, I was in the hospital. So that was again kind of a memorable last day. All my three organizations, guys, uh, this is just I'm chit chatting with you guys for 10-15 minutes. This is my fourth organization I'm working, the Wealth Desk, which I've recently joined. In all the three organizations, my last day has been a little dramatic. The first company, which was before MBA, my last day fell on my birthday. And it did not supposed to be my last day, but on my birthday, my manager calls me and says, Vaibhav, happy birthday. Today is your last day. My last day was actually the next day. So he said, no, it's okay, leave. So I think that was the first time in the history of that company that someone was leaving on his last day. When there was Deutsche Bank, when I quit Deutsche Bank, then my last day fell on Thursday because I had to join Edelweiss on 30th September so that I get included in the circle for the appraisal for the next day. So 29th September was a Thursday. I had to quit and I had to join on 30th September. So no break. So I thought this time probably I'll get I'll get a weekend or I'll get some time off. But again, as luck may have it, but not complaining at all. Many people congratulated me for the move. Many people questioned me as to why would you leave a structured firm like Edelweiss. First you left Deutsche and MNC, then you went into a kind of a mid-cap NBFC. Many of you would say that that's a struggling, that used to be a struggling company or was a struggling company. I don't agree, but not more struggling than Deutsche Bank in those days. And but obviously it's a listed firm, it's a large firm, and many of you on this call also probably dream of joining companies like Deutsche, Edelweiss, and all Motilal Oswal's of the world. So I'll say that it's a highly great company. But what made me move into a startup setup? Um, we'll talk about this later on. But as I promised you on various forums, LinkedIn and Telegram, let's discuss what is happening in the markets first for 5-7 minutes. Let's talk about my learnings from the last 1 month on personal finance. Because see, personal finance, I would say that I've been doing that over 10-12 years. But ultimately you would agree that personal finance, and a lot of people ask me on books, what books to read on personal finance, right? And I always suggest ET Wealth. You guys would remember. The reason being, guys, personal finance keeps on evolving. Something which was there in 70s or there in 80s might not stick around in 2020s, right? That is why even books from Benjamin Graham and Warren Buffett on value investing have actually, because those are Bibles, people keep on reading them. But ultimately, value investing is losing out its sheen. And when you talk about personal finance, as I always written, that back in those days in 80s, 90s, you just used to have FDs, LIC policies, and real estate. And today you have vast gamut of investment products where you can make your portfolio about, do the asset allocations. What asset allocation would our parents and grandparents would have been following? Because there were no major assets only, right? So there is no actually a timeless book on wealth management. The closest book which I have liked and I have really recommended to many of you is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, which uh, he recently wrote. So that's one of the best books I would recommend. But ET Wealth, Mint, Live Mint, or whatever, all these basic things. And I keep on writing on LinkedIn about various things I study. Many people on Telegram groups are sharing so much of stuff to read them, because you need to keep evolving yourself on personal finance stuff. Having said that, I have always said maintain an emergency corpus, maintain a health insurance, life insurance plan, buy it. This is the need. This is the time when I felt myself that great that I had a life insurance, great that I had a health insurance, great that I had a good emergency corpus. My wife actually always questioned me, why are you keeping so much money into liquid? Why are you paying year after year on health insurance? This was 4 years, 5 years back. And I was like, she's not from a finance background. She's like, theek hai, jo karna hai karo. But then uh, it looks like you are just squandering money on life insurance policies and term insurance, term insurance and health insurance year after year without getting any use of it. But these are the times when you actually feel the need for it. Emergency funds really helped us a lot, because there was a time when I had quit Edelweiss and I had yet to join Wealth Desk, and there was again for 15-20 days there was no I did not get April's salary, because there's a full and final and all those process that takes place. So if you don't get your salary for a month or two, middle class people like us, generally feel the heat. as to how to manage this month's money. So these are the reasons where you need to maintain that around 3 to 6 months corpus. Things have just gone out of the window I mean amidst the COVID thing, because generally I've always uh, told people to, I mean, the reason for emergency funds, number one was, what if you lost a job? This was the number one reason. Second reason was medical reasons. For medical reasons, you had health insurance. But for times like these, what happened, the hospital where I had admitted my mom. Uh, it's a huge, it's a huge, what we say, ruckus out there. And hospitals are also over flooded with beds and all, that they say that there are two ways of getting the health insurance benefits. One is cashless, and another is that you take a reimbursement later on after applying all the files, all the papers, documents, and all. Now, many hospitals, many TPS is the third party assurance. So many of these third party assistance, sorry. So these guys actually have this facility to do the cashless claims in certain hospitals. But the hospitals, even who were affiliated, were so overwhelmed with so many requests that they said, if you have a cashless claim, then I am sorry, we do not have beds for you. So basically, you pay now and you keep on, kind of engaging with your insurer later on. So if and only if you had some cash with your account, or your credit card had that kind of and it's a huge cost on any middle class family, of by admitting someone for 15-20 days for these kind of diseases. So what I wanted to say is that these kind of situations sometimes get out of hands, and these are emergency situations where you need to just keep things. You need to keep calm first of all. So this has all happened. Again, I would reiterate, guys, that do consider building a. You guys are young. I am sure most of you guys would be less than 30. Again, I would rather say buy a health insurance, buy a life insurance if you haven't. Some Naman is asking, is this the right time to buy health insurance, life insurance due to COVID? There are some. Yes, Naman, it is, but how can I see? You should have done by now, but if not, premiums have increased for sure. COVID covers are coming extra. I mean, some insurers are providing a COVID cover, just a COVID cover for the COVID, and take a health insurance separately. That can be done. Terms and conditions are there because things have changed for the life insurance companies as well, right? They are also taking so the premiums would have gone up. I'm not sure they have or not, but premiums, I'm sure, for health insurance, they would have certainly gone up in the last 6 to 8 months. So that's on the personal finance thing. I mean, the emergency thing. As employers currently providing health insurance, do you recommend to buy health insurance? Yes, Shubham. See, I quit Edelweiss, so I just lost my health insurance, which was being provided by my employer. And you don't plan for these movements across the firms, and then this kind of a thing happens. Now, what happened? I had quit Edelweiss in the first week of April or second week of April, and I required the health insurance cover in the third week of April. So that would have killed me, right, if I did not have an external health insurance. So I would, yes, recommend that you do have an external cover as well. LIC is still the best insurer to go for life insurance, or private plans are better off. Nishit, I do not have LIC. Honestly, I have ICICI Prudential and I have HDFC. This is for term insurance. So I do not have LIC, but I would suggest, if you want to add LIC to it, definitely do so, because LIC has certain advantages. Its premium are high because obviously the network, the kind of claim ratio you get, the legacy it has, the broker network it has, agents you say. So that's pretty high. That is why there's a premium. But if you go with the top ones like ICICI, Max, HDFCs, they're also pretty good, with which comes at around 40 to 50% reduction in the premium. So it's so some of my friends have said ki when do people actually feel the need of getting a term insurance claim? When they are no more there and their family members have to do the running around. When you are not there, do you want your family members to do the running around of taking papers and filing death certificates and this and that? I don't think so that someone is in that peace of a mind. So in that way, many people say that LIC gives that agent who can help you with all, because agent becomes your family mostly. It used to happen in 90s and 2000. I don't know how much it is still there, because now everything has become a business. But this is one reason where people say that because of this reason I'm okay to pay a double premium. I don't like that concept, because things, as we are moving towards more towards digital and regulatory, these things will actually die down. So until and unless you are needing it in next 3 to 5 years, if it's a horizon of 20 years, you can't say. But if it's a horizon of 15, 20 years, I see digitization taking over. And I don't want to comment that, but LIC losing more and more market share to the private players is what I can just assume or expect. Anyways, moving ahead. Um, so many people ask me, why did you join this wealth? What is Wealth Desk basically? I'll come to that, and by that way, now that I am talking about that, let me introduce the guest for the today. The guest is none other than the CEO of Wealth Desk today with me, Ujjwal Jain. He is there on the call today, and I have just requested Ujjwal to just let me brief my beloved audience for the first 30, 35, 40 minutes, because it has been some time. I need to speak with them, and then probably we can do that Q&A with him. We can understand more about Wealth Desk directly from him. Why did he start? What is his background? How did we meet? Actually, this is all very, very interesting, because you guys would be, see, basically, I have been getting a lot. How do I put it? Once you are into the industry, right? If you are, so I did investment banking for about 4, 5 years. And once that was there, I was getting calls from a lot of other investment banks, because obviously people need, it's very difficult to get into the first company, which most of you struggle, or when you want to change your line. But when you are into that line, the offers will keep on pouring in. It just depends upon the macros and the, the how the markets are facing. So when I was at Deutsche, I used to get a lot of investment banking calls. It just depended upon where I wanted to go. Same thing will happen for all you guys. Sahil is asking what is going on. Okay, Sahil, I missed that. Okay, I'll jump onto that. Sahil is asking on a direct message. Guys, just ask on the like, select everyone and then ask, so that everybody knows that I'm not jumping off the ground. What's going on in the market from last month is that it's consolidating. And if you guys have been reading my LinkedIn messages, in January or February, I had put in that 2021 is going to be a year of consolidation. You can go down to my timeline and scroll it, and I said that it's going to be a year how 2018 was, right? And this is the year, unlike 2017 and 2020, where you were buying anything and everything was flying. Now you need to be very stock specific. Now you need to create a portfolio for yourself. You can't just keep on just close your eyes and buy any stock and it will go 4x, 5x. This is that year, and I think this will continue. The markets have been basically more tilted towards metals, commodity space right now. The defensive has taken defensive in the sense the health, the FMCGs and the sectors like utilities and all have taken a little backseat. But now you're seeing specialty chemicals, metals, steel sectors. Every other day, someone is asking whether steel has enough momentum left or it has lost the sheen. I think it has still some momentum left. SAS too, yeah. So basically, see, I have been tracking copper. Copper is one sector where I am long-term positive on. And when you talk about copper, there's only one company which comes into the mind. Although there are a few companies which deal in copper, but one company which is who can write fast. First, I'm just waiting someone to write on the.
Hindalco.
So Hindustan Copper. Vedanta, Hindustan Zinc, yeah. So see, the difference between Hindustan Zinc and Vedanta and all these things are that they are not completely into copper. Hindustan Copper is completely into copper from extraction to, final. I do not know the entire life cycle of processing of copper, but Hindustan Copper is the only company which deals in the entire gamut of across the copper segment. And the only thing I did not like was that it's a PSU. My thesis is that I never touch PSUs. The only PSUs I've ever invested was in IRCTC, and I've exited that. I don't even touch SBI. So that's the only thing. But Hindustan Copper is the only other PSU I've ever taken right now, because honestly, I do not have any other option. But there are a lot of private sector banks. There are a lot of companies like Neyveli Lignite, NLC, or Nalco, everything is just running, aluminium. When sector runs, people just keep on buying. Garvit, yes, IRCTC is good, but I am just waiting for this lockdown and all to over, or get IRCTC at a better price. Is nothing else. Otherwise, IRCTC has been the only exception on the PSU space in my list. So see, basically, it's all about how you create your portfolio. Many people just keep on running about ITC, ITC, ITC. ITC is very undervalued, but whether that fits in your portfolio or not for a long term, then you need to see. It should or it should not. I mean, not should, but it can or it cannot, depending upon your risk appetite, your portfolio construction is what I'm saying. Now, in the commodity segment, you have agri commodities which are just running. Sugar, Praj Industries. If someone was following Praj Industries, if someone was following your companies like other sugar companies, what all Dorke Sugar, Andhra Sugar companies was just running like helter and skelter. Praj Industry, I had taken at 190. It had reached around 350 in just a matter of 3-4 weeks. Now, how do you identify all these companies was one other thing which many people were actually asking on Telegram group. So I told that I used to, put that kind of sector ratios and I apply some kind of a technical analysis. But this is one part. There are a lot of other ways where you can do all these things. Follow the macro news. Commodity cycle, basically metal cycle. It's a super cycle. It's a super cycle in the sense it's a cycle which stays for at least 10-20 years. Then it sees a bottom. So 10-20 years, I'm saying a little stretch, but I would say around 5 to 10 years. What I was studying somewhere was that the metal side, the commodity cycle actually is a cycle basically where the two bottoms are actually evenly apart. The tops can come, the tops might not be in the middle. It might be sometimes left aligned or left index or right index, but the bottoms come somewhere around every 7 or 8 years, it recurs. So you need to catch how these cycles have actually worked. Ashutosh, yes, we are moving towards decarbonization. And so, yes, so EVs, so basically the use of copper is going to be the replacement of oil, replacement of fuel, because more and more we move towards EVs. EVs का सबसे ज़्यादा usage, copper का सबसे ज़्यादा usage is in EVs. And 5-7 years, 10 years down the line, this is going to be, now what has happened in the past is that the demand is actually has surged a lot at a higher pace than what the supply was, because in order to mine a copper mine or take copper out, it takes a little time, it takes long, right? But when demand keeps on increasing and the issues which are happening in Brazil and in China, that China is also like putting curbs on their exports and all, there is a huge demand for metals like copper and steel and all. There's a lot of material on net these days, and so whatever I read is actually, kind of people are moving towards commodity. The good thing these days is that you keep on learning about new stuff as markets are changing so huge and so fast. The only thing I am unable to keep pace by myself is cryptocurrencies, and you guys have been deluging completely. You have taken over your cryptocurrencies or the Telegram group with the cryptocurrency post. I'm still learning and I'm still not able to learn, because I learn Bitcoin, then there's Dogecoin comes in, I learn something else, and there's Ethereum comes in, I learn something else, and the Shibu comes in. So I said, "ठीक है भैया, I'm okay with my slow money making rather than gambling." But yes, someone asked if you could put 3 to 4% in cryptocurrencies. You can take a gamble if you can, if your asset allocation or risk appetite allows you to. FinShots wrote about copper. FinShots is amazing, guys. Subscribe to FinShots. They're my kind of friends, but I'm not promoting them. But FinShots writes great articles. Anyways, so ठीक है. So this is how the markets have been working. Markets have been consolidating in the range of 14,200 to 14,800 or 900, and majorly what takes it down is basically the banks. When the COVID has come, and it's just like now inflation is coming in. US has reported around 4.5 to 5% inflation recently. I'm sure India is going to report higher inflation soon, if not next month, then probably in the next 2-3 months. And with the rising inflation expectations, the equity markets tend to lose a bit. But in that scenario, which kind of sectors will probably give you a little better returns? This is the time when you, as I said, that you make a portfolio. And I hope you guys know about core and satellite approaches of making a portfolio. So core is something. So what I do for myself is uh, core portfolios, and we were discussing again this on the other day on the Telegram group. Core is where I keep around 15 stocks, which I will never sell. I will never sell, at least for next 5 to 10 years. These are the names like Reliance, HUL. Uh, I have Tata Motors in that as well. I have not sold Tata Motors even at 60. I bought it. I had started buying it at 300, bought it at 60 also, and it's again at 300. Just pretty. I like that company a lot. Then there are companies like Relaxo, Pidilite, ICICI Life Insurance, General Insurance. I'm just giving out my portfolio stocks names, guys. Not recommending, but just for so that you can associate yourself more with these kind of names. So these kind of companies where I do not find any issue with the corporate governance, and I know that in the long run these are the behemoths. These will eventually be number one player in their sectors, and hence keep on taking market share, keep on getting that margins. They have the ability to, they have the moats, so they have the ability to create huge and better margins for themselves, and will never go down in the long run. Maybe 3 or 4 years they are not performing well, but eventually they will catch up. Their earnings will catch up. So these stocks I always buy on dips. So whenever some stock is going by 1% down, 2% down, I'll just buy one or two stocks depending upon what price it is. Now for HUL, I'll just buy one stock because it is 2,000 rupees. But if I'm talking about Tata Motors, I might buy five stocks, 15,000. Five stocks, it's 1,500 rupees. Sahil, how to find multi-bagger stock is very, very, it's books and theses have been written over it here. So it's very difficult, and it's only once in a while you can find a multi-bagger stock, because the finding multi-bagger stock is not the only thing. You need to stick around with that. For example, SAIL. Now SAIL was at 40 when many people I know bought it. Now SAIL is at 140, 150 rupees. It's a four-bagger by now. Right. Now you will say, okay, I mean 4 or 5 bagger is not a multi-bagger. Multi-bagger generally I say at least 8 to 10 times hona chahiye. But then there are many stocks which became multi-bagger in last 1 year. Whether they are multi-baggers, I don't know. Symphony stock. Symphony was a great multi-bagger story. So ultimately what I tend to also do is, people start asking कि अब exit कब करना है. Now Tata Steel went down 3 days, and people started asking, now is the cycle over, whether we should exit. Tata Steel is a big name. It can't be like a multi-bagger ki 600 ka 6000 ho gaya. It is very difficult. But then would you stay along in that company for such a long time, be patient and see it becoming 10 times? For me, how I define my investment thesis for a multi-bagger is that I will buy a stock and wait for it to at least double, more than double, let's say 2.5 times. If it is giving me 2.5 times, which is 150% of gains, I will sell 40 to 50% of the holdings, and then remain with the half, or 50 to 60% of the holdings which are free cost for me. If they become a multi-bagger, I am happy. If they don't, even if they become zero, I am okay. One major company which I researched in 2014, when I was just starting, when I had started Deutsche Bank job as well. So I was researching this company called Prima Plastics. Just read about it. So Prima Plastics was 47 back then. It was 2014 October or November, and I had done a great depth of study on it. It's a plastic firm, obviously by name you can guess so. And the other competitors were, the other peer set were Wimplast, Supreme, Nilkamal, and all the larger companies which were trading at around 35 to 40 PE by back then. This company was trading at 8 to 10 PE and had some business in Africa, some business in South America and all. And I really liked, and I knew the promoter. I met the promoters actually. I went along with my friends and all. So I really liked the company, and I bought it at 50-51. Then I held on to it, and I traversed the entire 2017, and that company became from 50 to almost 300. And I was like, "Mere ko to mil gaya jackpot," but I did not have an exit strategy. In fact, I had exit strategy, but the regulations in investment banking are so stringent that you need to take hundreds of approvals to buy or sell a stock. I wasn't getting any approval, so I said, "Let it be, yaar, pada hai, pada rehne do." Finally, when I quit Prima Plastics, finally, when I quit Deutsche Bank, when I entered Edelweiss, I could sell that company, sell that stock at 130 rupees. So it had come down from 300 to 130. So it gave me a 2.5 times returns over a period of 4 years. Not great, because I had already made around 6 times. But ठीक है, अभी what could we do? But ideally, I should have, maybe you could have said कि अभी 300 पे बेच दो. What it is currently trading at, it again came back to 40, 45 last year. And now it is somewhere around 110, 120. It never went to 300. So these kind of stories are and great management. I still like the management. I still like the story. But abhi nahi mil raha hai, because the investor sentiments are not towards that company. The investor are not in the middle when it was rising from 50 to 300. Lot of brokerage houses also came in, because all these micro cap, small cap companies are generally not tracked. But when some company like ICICI started tracking it, when ICICI started tracking it, went from 150 to 200 in matter of 2 to 3 days, what I remember. So all these things are, you need to take care that you need to figure that company out before the institutional investors actually figure that out. How to do that as retail investors is very, very difficult, because you are just exposed to the system in front of you, just annual reports. And annual reports India में small cap or micro cap, small cap, mid cap में annual reports actually don't really matter, because what's going on behind is a completely a different ball game. Guys, I'll read the comments later on. So just let me now move ahead. So story about Wealth Desk is that I was getting a lot of offers in Deutsche from other investment bank companies, but I did not join because I did not find offers lucrative. Then when I was at Edelweiss, every other second week, third week, I was getting offers from other wealth firms, but I was not joining because Edelweiss was pretty good enough and I was doing pretty well over there. I was also getting a lot of offers from other friends of mine. Basically, yeah, this is the time. Last 5 years, 6 years, it has been a time of startups booming in. Now, when the startups are booming, and a lot of my friends also from IIM Indore, from CFA Institute, and other grad colleges, they were like, let's join together and do this stuff. But I was like, yeah, every other day, a lot of startups are coming up, but I did not want to really I was not liking the business model, you can say. So Ujjwal is a friend I know from 2018. And how do I know Ujjwal is that Ujjwal is a fellow CFA charter holder. And I had met him in one of the conferences. This also shows you, this also, kind of reinforces the point that you need to network a lot, guys. I have got majority of the offers, majority of these kind of assignments from people I have met in the conferences, people I have spoken over some different varied topics, people who are pursuing CFA level 1, level 2, level 3. I would certainly suggest, right now we are not having conferences in physical, but whenever there is a webinar of a CFA, do attend that. Try to find fellow CFA charter holders, try to talk to them, what do they do? And this is how you network. I mean, you are studying not for taking theoretical knowledge, because what happens is that, as I said, there is an abundance of material on internet today. अगर मुझे कॉपर साइकिल एमबीए में नहीं पढ़ाई गई है तो मैं कहीं ना कहीं तो किसी ब्लॉग पे पढ़ के समझ लूंगा. But what makes me different is what makes everybody different is the kind of network that you are currently in. So I met Ujjwal in one of the CFA conferences, and we have been talking with each other, not really on Wealth Desk or something, but in January he approached me with this idea, and I said, boss, this is the future of wealth management. What is the future of wealth management? What is Wealth Desk? Is what we'll discuss right now. Lot of you guys had actually asked me to have a session on small case, if you guys remember. So I would just generally, so conceptually, I would say very similar, but lot of differences. How, and this is the reason where I am more inclined towards Wealth Desk. So it's all about portfolio allocation, asset allocation. The topic which I have always thought to write upon, asset allocation, and obviously I was taking this session also. I was about to take this session, paid session, if you guys remember, on asset allocation, but I had to unfortunately refund money for all of the attendees because of my health. And I thought that let's take this topic on a free webinar on through this method, that how all things are fitting up. So Ujjwal, are you there? I was tracking you, but you have said that yes, you are there.
Yes, I am there. Yeah. Hello.
Hi, hello. Good afternoon. So as you would be hearing, this is my kind of beloved audience. I always keep on speaking with them. Unfortunately, we have only 100. I had registrations from 580 people today, and I feel very, very sad to actually have let go of so many people today. But this session is being recorded. I will upload it on YouTube. I will put it on LinkedIn or Telegram to for you guys to view. So Ujjwal, without delaying further, I hope you are good. Everybody in your family is good because everybody is undercover these days.
Thanks, Vaibhav. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm good. Actually, I am having a headache today. I don't know. Maybe Mumbai weather has changed today suddenly. I don't know what happened, but yeah, I'm
So
doing well and really happy to connect with your fellow vibrant community with whom you interact so closely. It's really nice to connect with you all. And yeah, you were saying something.
yes, so let's start, Ujjwal. I think the audience what they would like, and I know the nerve of what these guys would like to hear is that what I know is that you are an engineer, right? You have done your engineering from computer science, and then you did CFA. There was no MBA involved, and a lot of guys actually ask me, "कि boss MBA करूँ या CFA करना है? क्या करना है after engineering?" Because I need to
Yes.
change my field. I do not want to code. I do not want to get into mechanical, computer science, this and that, blah blah. I have done my MBA myself, and then CFA actually, helped me to get into investment banking role and this and that. But you are one of the very few people I know who has made large just by doing engineering and then follow it up by CFA. First of all, why CFA if you had no intention of doing, let's say, MBA or finance?
Okay, great question. Actually, this is a question for I think a lot of people in our community have to really think about in next 10 years. This question would not have been that relevant for let's say maybe last 10, 15 years when the transformation was not that fast. But as the transformation becomes so fast, so aggressive, then this question becomes important because every step you take in your life today is going to impact you for next 10, 15, 20, 30. I mean, for like your entire life maybe. So to start, like I'll
I'll
ask
ask
maybe one question to everyone is that how many of you have an engineering background? Just put up on your chat that yeah, I'm an engineer, but like took up MBA or doing CFA. And I mean generally, like, because I'll tell you my story. I mean, because I see that most of you people are really at level where you are job seekers or looking to change careers or maybe take a very exponential route to grow. So I would take that route. I'll actually tell my story like in a like a brief model, like hopefully I mean justify my evolution. So I did my engineering in computer science back in 2009, and being part of the premium engineering college of India, I mean I did my engineering from Jadavpur University, is one of the most premium engineering colleges in the eastern part of India apart from IIT Kharagpur. And as IIT Kharagpur placement, like we also get all these Google, Microsoft of the world coming in, and then obviously like the cream of financial markets like Goldman Sachs, Credit Suisse, DE Shaw, all these stalwarts come in our campuses, and they really need computer science engineers because they are their core growth story, whether they're doing markets or they're doing wealth management or whatever area where they're working on proprietary trading, they really need computer science engineers to scale up or to actually drive their growth. So I was very keen to actually always join markets, like take up a role in markets, though I was doing my computer science. And I did computer science because I wanted to do computer science. I mean, just to give a sense that I couldn't get computer science in one of the IITs where I wanted to, so I took up in Jadavpur. So, and even I like not took BITS Pilani, or and I mean I was clear that I wanted to do computer science. So that's the level at which I was clear that I wanted to do computer science. The next thing I was very clear about during my engineering is that I don't want to go into the core R&D computer science focused roles, which is around like let's say typically a job in Google or a Microsoft. But I was very clear that I wanted to join markets because see, I was looking at markets transformation since class, like I was in class 6 7. I was when I started taking doing programs, doing my school assignments. I could see how the newspaper last pages which had used to have stock prices moved to tickers on the news channels, and then gradually on internet and all that. And these are the early changes that markets have seen in terms of price dissemination to the stakeholders or the investors in the global markets. And I'm not talking about the institutional space, that I will talk once I talk about my corporate journey. So moment I actually realized that I want to go into markets from computer science, some of the companies that I was very keen about was DE Shaw. I mean, if you all know, DE Shaw is one of the darkest halls on Wall Street. They are run by a bunch of computer scientists, mathematicians, statisticians, and they actually look at markets from a very computer science thinking and not from a typical market mindset. And that's why they have transformed Wall Street in terms of how you look at hedge fund industry, which is so tech driven, so cutting edge technology driven, and some of the latest innovations in actually computer science algorithms are being driven by some of the Wall Street firms, not just like the Facebook, Googles of the world. So you can imagine that kind of culture they have. So I got the campus into D Shaw, and luckily I joined a team within D Shaw called Treasury, which works at the epicenter of front office trading, middle office capital, like the margin management, and obviously the core backend where you are tracking your PNL. So it sits at the center of all of these, and I was driving a lot of transformations in terms of building modeling a lot of complex margin methodologies that we have with global counterparties to do our to handle our portfolios across some of the biggest counterparties globally. So coming from a computer science background, I was so exposed to markets at a very nascent stage just after my engineering, and I could see how everything was looked from a tech point of view. There was nothing, I mean, like the conceptually, the instrument thinking, the business model thinking, and how this whole structure runs as a hedge fund. Beyond that, everything was looked from a tech point of view. That's the culture I was in after my engineering, and that made me realize how transformative computer science and tech is to actually this global hedge fund industry. And being part of that, like if I can tell you today, as we speak, the space where I was in, that might be 10, 20 years ahead that what we are in India right now. So that's the forward looking uh, stuff I was exposed to, and it was all going well for like first 4 years, and coincidentally, I mean, that's like fortune is like, if you're destined to something, you're destined to something. D Shaw did a joint venture with Mukesh Ambani in India in Reliance Industries. So this was a 50-50 JV where D Shaw's technological prowess, fund management prowess will be used, and Reliance's treasury money. And this JV was set up in Bombay out of BKC, and they were handpicking people from the entire global D Shaw offices. And I was, because I've been very aggressive within the company. So one of the things that traits I was clear about my entrepreneurship, that within my job also I was very aggressive. I mean, so aggressive that I used to challenge the status quo at every level. And I have been in very uncomfortable situations, because as an employee there's a limit where you can discomfort people, like, but I've been always like that, a very aggressive personality in terms of changing things. So the company knew that I had that uh, I mean, attitude to actually take up a very entrepreneurial kind of venture. So they told me that there's an opening in Bombay. You just move out from a global hedge fund, which is very cream. Actually, you are talking about New York, Wall Street kind of firms, and typically come back to Indian Reliances of the world, which is quite desi, like comparably. So I was asked, but I was very keen, because that was one entrepreneurial opportunity you cannot leave, and within the D Shaw comfort. So I took that opportunity. I came to Bombay, and this was like around 2013-14. I graduated in 2009. This was like around 2012-13, and that's when I actually got exposed to Indian markets, like in true sense, like in looking at it from a business point of view. And initially we did prop trading, we did high frequency trading on co-location facilities inside the exchanges. These are all high low latency cutting edge stuff, like we were talking about, which are largely computer science algorithms driven, and less to do with how you look at markets, stock prices, P, and all of that. It is pure tech stuff. So I was building, we were doing prop, then we gradually set up an institutional brokerage business on the sell side. I was part of that, and everything was going good. This was within 2 years of the JV. This whole thing was going well, but like, because of some circumstances, the JV had to shut down because things were not working well for D Shaw and Reliance. And that is when I realized that India opportunity is huge. I actually have to stay back in India, like within this Mumbai, and look at Indian markets closely, because I don't want to again move into a global hedge fund business model where D Shaw asked us to move back to the global hedge fund business. And that is when I actually realized that I have looked at active fund management industry so closely, because the hedge funds are the pioneers in active fund management. I decided that I will strategically actually take up a job on the passive side, and I joined MSCI after my D Shaw stint when the JV was shut down, and I could actually uh got again destiny. I got an opportunity to work on some of the most sophisticated smart beta ETF like indices which on which several ETFs were built, and this is like within MSCI. Within 1.8 years I got exposed to some of the most more forward looking indices that MSCI was building at that time, which include multi-factor indices, ESG indices around carbon credits and all of that. And I got exposed to see how indices are built and on which some of the most sophisticated ETFs have been created, on which trillions and trillions of dollars are being tracked. I mean, I could see the vastness of the passive industry, and also see the bridge that was being created between the active and the passive. Because if you look at smart beta, it's a bridge between active passive. Technically, it's an active portfolio, but passively managed. And so I could see all of that. And while I was doing that, I was talking to actually Indian businesses, because I was clear that I want to take up the entrepreneur route in India. And this is when actually I met several brokers in the country, including Edelweiss and Sayer Khan. I mean, luckily I had the opportunity to actually I talked to so many brokers in Bombay because of the networking. And as Weber was talking about, networking is so important. And I could actually network with so many brokers. And when I met all these brokers, one thing was very clear, that India was largely driven into three segments when it comes to asset management and wealth management. One is that you have a very exciting mutual fund industry that has been prospering very well over the years. And that has actually still not seen the light of the day in terms of scale. It is still today also, it has not seen. And second thing is that India is a very largely distributor led market. Like when it comes to especially portfolios of fund management, so to say, it is not investor led, it is distributor led. And the third thing was SEBI was doing interesting changes. I mean, I could create parallels with what they were doing, what I could see how SEC would do in US or Europe, or in developed markets, that what they have been doing for like 20, 30 years. SEBI was trying to clean up a lot of things. Mutual fund reclassification was one thing. SEBI RIA draft framework 2013, for the first time it came to build fee-based businesses and actually dealing distribution and fee, which obviously has evolved even till last year. They have added a lot of drafts to that, changes to that. And the other thing was broking. It was getting transformed thanks to Zerodha. The whole broking is now a tech play, not a actually a broking play. It's a tech play now. So that I could see, if all this culminates into a very large play that's going to come in next 2020. Like this is, I'm talking about 2015. And I could see that in 2020, like within 5 years, the way other countries in the world have transformed in terms of actually bringing investment solutions to retail investors, India will see a culmination of all of these changes together. And that is when actually in 2016 I formally quit my job at Morgan Stanley Capital, MSCI, for like now they call MSCI, and actually took up started building the Welldesk platform. Now Welldesk as a platform, the essence is that what we are talking about in India as a very like long-term change, not the short term in terms of acquiring customers, but a long-term change, is that we have a very nascent market in terms of the kind of portfolios out there for retail investors. ETF is obviously, it's a long drawn story. It will take a while to have more sophisticated ETFs in India. When it comes to retail, the de facto product that we have right now is mutual fund. And we all know that many of the schemes for last 10 years have been built around distributor, and many have been built with the mass market as a focus. But when it comes to asset allocation, when it comes to actually really looking at how I build my portfolio for the long run, for the short term, the kind of solutions that we have is not that sophisticated, not that comprehensive compared to global markets. Now, culminate extend this further. When it comes to now direct stocks and ETFs, when you have a broking account, now at that level, India, if you see, like majority of the brokers used to have stock tips. Like you get all these. I'm looking at your chats. Like people are talking about what's your take on Kotak versus ISI. Honestly, I'll talk about all of these from personal experiences.
So Ujjwal, let me structure this a bit so it becomes more interesting for people out there. I know you have given a lot of already. My next five questions you have answered in your in the last 5 minutes. So just taking a break and putting some things in perspective. So guys, like we were just yesterday talking about that someone posted that passive funds are gaining prominence, but that article was actually, when I opened the article, it was UK article. And then that's pretty much evident that US and UK are moving more towards passive investing. And then a lot of research papers have been written that post fees and post taxes and everything, active fund managers have actually not been able to outperform the passive fund managers in the long term. And this is where ETFs and index funds comes into play. I've again written a lot of times that I play large cap through ETFs or index funds rather than going to active mutual funds, because ultimately you have that 100 stocks horizon where you need to put 80% of your money. And then mutual funds are anyways, these are de facto investment vehicle for you to create a portfolio. But are they the best? I mean, best to kuch nahi hota hai. Best, I don't know, even anything can be there. There are always going to be some kind of developments. But what I feel is more and more people are going to move towards ETFs in the next 5 years in India, managed funds in next 5 years in India, and with the kind of restrictions which currently probably SEBI would have on mutual funds and a lot of these aspects. And now that SEBI is always about the regulatory aspect, like 20% have to be kept in the units of mutual funds, this and that. So that will always be there. In that kind of a scenario, you definitely need to. Now, what happens in mutual funds currently? You have a portfolio which you can see once in a month, and then you do not have any say. Axis Blue Chip acha hai ya Kotak Emerging Equity acha? This is the only question what you can ask, right? Obviously, these are two different buckets, large cap and mid cap. But ultimately, this is the only thing which you can ask whether I should go into Axis. And we had enough sessions on how to analyze equity mutual funds. We'll again have it later on, maybe next month. But there are some issues. Now, what Ujjwal is trying to say is that in the next 4 to 5 years, there are going to be the advisory models which are probably will be coming into play and which can run parallel to mutual funds. Now, Ujjwal, I now want to ask you and make this question as to how you see the future landscape, and continue with whatever you are saying. I just thought I'll give it a direction.
Yeah. So so the thing is, see, if you look at, so we should create parallels. Like we cannot, we have, it's always about creating parallels. So if you look at payment landscape, if you look at lending, if you look at insurance also, to like not that great, but yeah, insurance is also picking up. Especially payment and lending, you see, the payment and lending has actually got embedded into the consumer lifestyle. Like today, lending is not about like giving the loan. Lending is now have so many flavors when it comes to retail. Within retail there's so many segments. Then consumer corporate lending, there are so many flavors, and they are so personalized, so nuanced in terms of offering to the customer. Because see, today the beautiful part of like technology based distribution is that the larger story can be stitched by multiple partners together and create a very personalized, very nuanced solution for the end customer. Now, what about investment and management, asset management? Now, it has been largely fragmented ecosystem. Because see, aaj main, if I buy, so if typically life cycle of an investor, I'll tell you. So I took my job in 2009. I got my first brokerage account, as we all have been regulated by financial companies. So I had choices of Kotak Securities and Sher Khan. I ended up having one in Kotak, and 2 months later Sher Khan also pushed something, and I ended up having uh, a Sher Khan account also. The next thing that started is uh, that people started saying that if you want to create long-term wealth, don't look at direct stock, because direct stock is more adventure. It's like your adrenaline rush. And that's how people look at stock markets, like largely in like when they start first, कि यार जल्दी से पैसे बन जाए types. Or but when it comes to wealth creation, people start with FD, typical journey. Then they become smarter, they buy their first mutual fund, and then actually when they mature enough and can look at information, stories, markets and all, they start buying stocks. They are also, because stock buying is one thing, doing your day job is another thing. You can't track the stock for your entire life. You guys were talking about multi-baggers. I had bunch of multi-baggers. Coincidentally, it became a multi-bagger because I never looked at the stock. Honestly, that's the life. Behavioral part of our life takes up so much that looking at the prices, we end up closing positions. So it's a different story. So but when it comes to broking, when there's no play where a retail investors can create wealth systematically. Because from a customer point of view, from an investor point of view, process needs to be created so that your wealth creation is systematic. Now, mutual fund did that right by bringing lazy money. Today, when you invest in a mutual fund, even if you make 10, 20, 30%, you don't come out and say that let me just exit the mutual fund. You just keep it mostly. It's a lazy money. Now, but when it comes to broking, it's always hot money. The moment you invest in stocks, couple of days, quarter, months, if you're smart, maybe a year or two, you end up doing something wrong with your stock, because you have been guided that way, because brokers wanted you to churn more. But are are direct stock ETF not the greatest wealth creators? They are, but you have to do it systematically. And the because like advisory model now beautifully can capture that on broking, wherein a specific advisor focusing on specific aspects of investment, let's say a core portfolio, as you were talking about, tactical portfolio, or a thematic portfolio, or a sectoral portfolio. They are smartest people out there who might not be accessible to retail investors till maybe long back, but now they are available, and they are creating these portfolios for retail because they want to actually go to a large market. They don't want to stick to that ultra HNI with specific quantum and be happy. They are ready to go to that retail investors, and that is why, that is the transformation that is what we're going to see in the next 5 years, where some of the best portfolio managers will come on Wealthdesk, are on Wealthdesk. They will create some of the best portfolios, and obviously other platforms also, and they will make it available to retail investors on broking, where instead of direct stocks, instead of direct ETF, you can invest in these managed portfolios, whether it is an asset allocation ETF portfolio, it is a thematic sectoral, and you can have a more comprehensive asset allocation for your entire investment objectives, where you can very well define your core objectives, very well define your tactical objectives, very well do your sector rotations without having the complexities of individual stocks, and make systematic real wealth, which will help you to build your secondary source of income for your emergency funds, for your shorter term funds, for your long term European holiday, or whatever you want to do in your life. So this is how I look at the markets will transform for the retail investors in coming time, where platform like ours is actually trying to make it very democratic to have some of the best portfolios out there for retail investors, and make that easy for them to invest in them. And brokers are realizing that from a customer point of view, instead of pitching them direct stocks and direct ETFs, if we pitch them these managed portfolios in terms of creating their for their long term wealth and their short term wealth creation or trading objectives, they actually gonna compound wealth. And we will see a lot of consolidation around advisory led model, which will have two long term impacts. One, we will see a beautiful product side innovation in India beyond mutual fund, which is already happening through platform like ours, where you will see MSCI of India being created, like smart beta portfolios, asset allocation ETF portfolios, tilt between like multi asset portfolios, and thematic portfolios around EV, digital India, make in India. These things were not possible in India till now. Now these are all will be easily accessible to retail investors, and they can be actually executed by retail investors in their demat account with complete transparency at a very low cost, and at complete control when to exit, when not to exit, all that. And any changes in that portfolio, they can do one touch approval, complete transparency. All these things will culminate into a beautiful ecosystem that is gonna we see in next 5 years, where we will have some of these will resemble into a smart ETFs, which will again go into your portfolios, and we'll see a very diversified, very vibrant investment solutions ecosystem in India in coming time. Yeah, so
So,
yeah.
so here I would like to add one thing, Ujjwal. Uh, hello.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes.
Ujjwal, you just continue. I am facing some issue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I see some questions around small case. So, say conceptually, small case and wealth baskets, like we call us on our platform, these portfolios are called wealth basket. We are same conceptually. We are same. I mean, the evolution of small case and ours is very different. That's one change. The other thing is, see, at the end of the day, do you when Navi AMC is launched? Let's say, for example, Navi is gonna launch an AMC, Grow is gonna launch an AMC. Will you go and ask Navi and Grow that how are you different from Kotak and HDFC AMCs? See, the future actually is the concepts, the conceptually the platforms like ours or maybe small case, they have created this space, but the strength or the longevity of these offerings lies on the returns, the end offering that you give it to retail investors, and that is where the focus needs to be. See, conceptually, cryptocurrencies, I see a lot of people talking about cryptocurrencies now. Cryptocurrencies, if you look conceptually, it's all blockchain technology. Now as Weber was saying, I started following Bitcoin, then Dogecoin came. Conceptually, they are all built on blockchain technology. Now, which cryptocurrency makes sense for the larger global adoption for as a digital currency, or every country will they have their own digital currency? But conceptually, blockchain technology is a beautiful concept. We should all appreciate that. It removes the intermediary, whether it comes to central bank. Tomorrow, it could be your district depository participant. Not talking about CDSL future as a business. so I'm not sure. So these things are beautiful, like as a concept. No, so Wealthdesk, Wealth Basket, Small Case, as a concept, we are same. From a retail customers, it's same. But when it comes to offering the institutional portfolios that we bring to the table versus somebody else, there lies the difference, because our focus has been very institutional. For example, of smart beta, we wanted to make sure we have the MSCI of India sans the ETF, because you can't have ETF smart beta ETFs in India today, but you can have smart beta wealth basket. then we wanted to ensure have a very sophisticated asset allocation ETF portfolios like MSCI Bara provides to institutional clients, or Aladdin by BlackRock and all that AQR provides. We wanted to bring that to retail. Our asset allocation wealth basket focuses on those institutional strength. So it is all about the institutional capabilities of this portfolio available at a reasonable cost to retail investors, and the performance of these portfolios. That's what you need to focus on in the coming time. And the fact that we are trying to make it, we are trying to expand the envelope of making this portfolios of wealth basket into your asset allocation in a very easy to like adopt way, where we bring in more sophisticated tools like portfolio analysis or optimization tools, where we can help you, assist you in terms of bringing these wealth baskets into your portfolio. So there are a lot of things we are trying to do, and I think compete like people similar platforms are trying to do. But at the end of the day, uh, the idea is to actually bring out the best to retail investors, and we gonna continue focus on that.
See, basically one thing which I was about to say and my connection got lost was, guys, what happened in the last 6 to 7 months in Indian scenario is that if you guys would have been reading somewhere around October or November, SEBI came up with this rule that a distributor can't be an advisor and an advisor can't be a distributor. You need to choose one. So what I was doing at Edelweiss, I was generally more, I'm not a sales guy, you know that, right? So I'm more about finance and giving the ethical advice to people. So I was just going to all my clients and saying, boss, I will not push regular funds to you. You would have heard from me, read from me that I just say go for the direct funds because it will save you expenses. So what I used to do was, कि आप अपना portfolio give it to me, I will give you an advice on it, and I will charge an advisory fee. So there is a very much cost saving for the lot of HNI clients which I used to cater. But when SEBI came up with this stringent law, and then Edelweiss, IFL, and every other wealth firm actually said that you either choose to be an advisor or a distributor, then I thought that India is now ready to go towards advisory model. Distribution will always be there because India is a very, very large country. And you cannot enter tier two or tier three city without an AMC cannot enter these cities without a distribution network, a robust distribution network. But it's not going to be 1 month, 2 months, or 1 year time. It's going to be a 5 year, 7 year time. And India always moves towards what US is doing. And we are always 5, 7 years late. Now, US has moved most towards the advisory model. We are also going towards that. And when there are a lot of this things have come up, there's so many people who want to get an RIA license, which is your registered investment advisor. And then because they are good, now everybody can't become a fund manager of HDFC AMC or an ICICI AMC, right? So there is a little very less space over there as becoming a fund manager of a large AMC or a large fund house or a PMS or any IA. By the use of these RIAs, there can be so many people who are good with their stuff, providing you their curated wealth baskets, I will say in terms of wealth desk, or small cases in terms of small case company, who you can get, you can get assistance from. Pay a little advisory fee. And I think advisory fee on all these platforms are very, very less than what you pay to an expense ratio of a mutual fund, because these guys want to create that kind of a volume, right? We want to create that kind of a volume. जितने से जितने कम में आपको पूरा portfolio मिल जाए, that's good. What extra cost you need to incur, which you do not incur in mutual funds, is obviously the brokerage fees, because all the stocks are directly coming into your account and you are exiting it. So वो churn होगा. But then these days when Zerodha is there, Upstocks, Grow, these kind of discount brokerage brokers are there, that is also lessened to a very, very large extent. One another point which I liked about this wealth desk and wealth baskets are that they have a portfolio which is focusing very much on the momentum strategy. Now, someone asked in the group is that why is quant mutual fund, some quant mutual fund outperformed in the last 1 week or 2 weeks when the entire market was down? Because they are following an algo. And when you have a robust algo, and nobody will tell you how do mutual funds actually, active mutual funds are built using mostly fundamental analysis. Fundamental analysis and technical analysis, I have written a lot about. Fundamental analysis is obviously long term, and it has been in rounds of like years and decades and decades. But how the market has changed in the last so many years, and in fact after March 2020, what I see is that technical analysis is equally important. when you say technical analysis, you obviously it's not about only charts and all, but you need to see which stocks are moving, which stocks are not performing for a month, and then obviously they do not need a place in your satellite portfolio. When I say satellite portfolio, which is the portfolio which you are churning. I was talking about the core portfolio that I have 15 stocks which I'll never sell. I did not talk about the satellite portfolio. I also have a satellite portfolio of 15 to 20 stocks which I keep churning. I do not need to hold it for more than, let's say, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. काम खत्म, बेचो, आगे बढ़ो. Because you do not see a 0.5 or a 0.4 or a 0.3% ka churn when you are getting a 20% return over a period of 3 months or 4 months. So these momentum strategies actually capitalize on that. They will see which stocks are currently in, and nobody, the fund manager doesn't even know what are the top 10 holdings in his portfolio, because he has made a robust model, and that model will throw these numbers, these returns and all. And I was asking one of these guys as to the fund managers, which is your top holding in your portfolio. He said, yeah, I'll see and I'll check and I'll tell you. I don't care about that. It can be Praj Industries, it can be anything. But he has been outperforming the market by 30-40% alpha over the last 3-4 years, 5 years, in only 10 stocks, because the model is such like that. They will never tell you the model. Quant mutual fund will never tell you their proprietary model. Probably our guy will never tell you the proprietary model, because फिर उसमें कुछ बचता नहीं है. But then what you can do, if you are good with computer science, if you're good with Python, if you're good with all these strategies, you can try it, backtest, keep checking and see what works for you, what parameters go actually. There's a CMT which I told you that I've been trying to give CMT. So they all teach all kind of strategies which you can probably build in your Python code and then apply and do all these things. So I think for a satellite portfolio, definitely it makes sense to look at the momentum kind of strategies, and core portfolio I've already talked about. So this is where the Indian scenario has changed over the last 6 to 8 months. People are and will move towards advisory model more, and then kind of mutual funds might take in the lazy money, what Ujjwal was saying. So Ujjwal, again, over to you. And then I think if we are done, Ujjwal, can we start answering questions? It's 5:15. We'll take another 10, 15 minutes, and then
Yeah,
wrap it up.
I've been trying to respond
Acha, you
to
are
as many
okay.
questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I'm more than happy if we have more questions. So this question: will Python replace the Excel in finance industry? Do you want me to take this? I have more. I will be happy to take this.
Take it. Take it. No, I have views, but you are better placed.
If you guys have I have done one webinar with CFA Institute called Platformization of Financial Services: The Future of Investment Management Industry. We had talked a lot about all of these things, where will Python replace Excel, and how should I evolve my career, if I want to get into this space, and the future of the space is getting very technical, program driven, technology driven, all that. So how do I transition my career and all of that? So one of the fundamental thing is that Python or Excel, the fundamental thing is, when you work with Excel or you work with Python, the idea is that your ability to think with your problems is very sequential, very algorithmic. You try to find the sequence of steps you're trying to solve, and you use Excel formulas, and then if you're using Python, you write a bunch of a script or a program. The idea is that as long as you have the aptitude to actually sequence your problems, create an algorithmic thinking, have an aptitude for algorithmic thinking, where you can actually define an algorithm when you're trying to solve a problem with large data sets. Now, when it comes to implementation, today you are using Excel. Be very open minded about the fact that Python is also equally simple. If you guys actually try and launch an IPython notebook on your machine, I'm telling you, it is like being on Netflix. Like, you just can't leave it. Like, it's, once you get excited about it, once you start solving, it's nirvana, I can tell you. See, I come from a computer science background, did my CFA. I mean, I forgot to talk about that part. If you want, I can talk about whether you'll just let me know why I didn't do MBA, why I just stick to CFA, and why I did CFA first of all. Like, so I can talk about that. So there, see, the idea is that the industry is getting very technical. Whether you do whether you are into a relationship based business, whether you are in a very technical investment banking role, or you are an associate or an analyst, which is around doing sell side research, buy side research, or you are looking to get into trading, or you looking to get into a startup like ours, on the product side, sales side, engineering side, everywhere. The idea is that the underlying problem is getting very technical, very very like data driven. So the fact is the aptitude to actually think programmatically, like you don't need to know programming, but the aptitude to think programmatically, aptitude to think like how would this problem be handled at scale, like in terms, if have to solve this problem and you are not good with programming, the ability to think that way is a fundamental thing. Then you might have worked with a team within your company to actually solve that problem, or you eventually push yourself to solve that problem. So having that open mindset is necessary today. An analyst or a research guy, or whether it's buy side, sell side, or investment banking associate, or a trading trader, nobody can say that I can just simply not do programming or think like a programmer or a tech guy and actually have a very very long lasting job with high growth. It's not possible, because the industry has changed. I mean, today there's so much of volumes in markets going through algo trades. Like when you push an order even through your Zerodha or any brokers, imagine the kind of order management system that is running inside. Now those order management systems come to you as a single clip, but if you are one of those guys who are helping these companies to evolve for trading or for wealth management, you need to think like a programmer. You need to think like a product guy who is actually interacting with customers at the digital level, how you sequence that steps. You are a research guy, you are tracking companies. If you are not data, you can't crunch data at scale through your Python skill set or Excel skill set. You gonna feel that challenge at every place. So you, that aptitude to have a programmatic thinking. See, what I call today is that the world has moved from relationship based business to API based business. API is how technology, multiple platforms connect, integrate, talk to each other. So this thinking is very important. You need to be really constantly searching and learning about these new way of how business are transforming at every level. So this
So
is
Ujjwal, I'll add one thing over here. So not to scare the non-computer science engineers over here. So this is the question. Again, I've got a lot of times, see, boss, I have a commerce background. Now, how do I learn coding? Right? Obviously, it becomes difficult. I have done computer science engineering myself back in 2005 to 9, and in 2 years, I understood that this is not my cup of tea. But then the aptitude which you have, so coding has also become very, very simpler these days. In Python, as I hear is that I do not know Python completely, but as I hear is one of the simplest languages you can know. But you do not need to code. Not everybody needs to code, but you can know the algorithms. Algorithms are plain, simple logic written in English sentences. Even in the CFA curriculum, now Ujjwal and I did CFA long back. Like I did my L1 in 2010. But now what I see, the refresher readings and the updated readings, they are covering Python, they are covering coding, they are covering all the AI and ML algorithms in their textbooks. Why? Even they are expecting that the industry is going to change, and at least if you do not know coding, you should at least know what goes in behind that. Tomorrow, if you are an MBA and if you have done CFA, let's say, and you are heading some vertical where people are under you, they cannot fool you out of stuff. Ki, sir, ye to code ho hi nahi payega. You can say, boss, coding is your problem, but the algorithm you can put in this kind of fashion, right? So it all comes about analyzing, and you cannot say that, boss, I have a commerce background, isliye I can't do number crunching and all stuff, because you need to keep evolving. We keep evolving ourselves, right? When I was doing computer science, I never thought I'll do CFA in my life. But when I thought that there is a kind of a career in wealth management, I quit investment banking. I saw there is a career in advisory, I quit wealth management. So keep on evolving yourself, and this is what I can say. I mean, Python or Excel, whatever it is, you need to have the sound logic of doing
and
things
this
how
and
they
this
are.
and the biggest secret is start small. Don't think big. You might start with the first variable assignment on a Python, and eventually writing a full-fledged script to maybe analyze the green, like carbon credit, through some open source data. You can do all of that. It has to start small. See, the fundamental lies in the fact that you need to unlock that thought that I can't do this. I mean, that is the fundamental to anything. I mean, if you ask me, so this brings to the point that I did my computer science. I was a hardcore engineer. Like, I mean, till today I program. I mean, no questions asked, and I enjoy that. But and I've been part of architecting this Wellness platform. No, but I did CFA. Why? Because see, I looked at markets from a fact that 20, 30, 40 years markets will never be run by human beings. It will be always run by machines. Those machines need to be built by us, like whether it's said about. And I, being from computer science background, I need to know the building blocks of finance. And CFA is a great course to actually do that. So I took up level 1 as a passion exercise to learn back in 2010. Then I did my level 2 back in 2015, because I realized that I should do my level 2 also, and level 3 just before my, actually level 2 on 2013, or on level 3 2015. 2016, just before my marriage. I mean, I did all because I wanted to learn the building blocks of markets. And obviously last level 3 I did because Welldesk as a platform can be endorsed well from a CFA community point of view, because we are trying to bring in a lot of global performance principles into markets through our platform, and we're going to continue push ourselves, which India has not seen. And I think we as a CFA charter holders, we have that responsibility to endorse that, to push the Indian markets beyond what we have right now, and think that that community provides us that support, that vibrancy to bring that in India.
So Ujjwal, let's take 3-4 questions which were left and probably then wrap it up. So two interesting questions which I could see is that uh, someone is asking, what is your view on green portfolio by small case? Do you have any idea? I have not seen the green portfolio by small case. So if you have any
So
idea,
must
you
be
can answer.
some theme. So green portfolio could be around two principles. See, one is that so fundamentally anything which talks about green fund comes under the umbrella of ESG.
Right, ESG, correct.
So now if you ask me, the biggest problem, like we've been trying to work with some of our best like advisors around like OpenQ and all to actually launch something around ESG. One of the biggest problems is that the India, as Vaibhav also pointed out, the data disclosure of companies, including large caps, is very bad when it comes to actually drive the ESG metrics. Because see, I am come from MSCI, and we have pushed global companies to actually disclose so much of data so that MSCI can start ESG based indices. And I have seen that very bottom up, like in global markets. We are yet to see that in India. So data scarcity is very fundamental to build a real green ESG kind of portfolio in India. But rest assured, as we are pushing things, I think we will have a genuinely ESG compliant portfolio, which I think anybody who's trying to do right now would be doing more on a screener, very qualitative, not that institutional. I mean, if you ask me that can that green portfolio can be called an ESG compliant from a global standard, in India, nobody can do that. It will be whitewashing. It will be an eyewash. We are
I
trying to
saw
push that.
one of the ESG portfolios. I don't know which AMC it was about, but number one company in that ESG portfolio was Reliance. And I was like, ESG ka matlab environment, social governance, all three things are there. I don't know how that qualified, but I won't comment on that. But yes, you are right. I mean, we can't. ITC, जिस दिन मुझे ITC ESG में दिख गया, I am like shun the ESG concept in India, at least from the
ITC for ESG compliance, they will demerge their tobacco business.
Acha, Abhay is asking that is Welldesk a platform providing services to retail investors by providing access to investment advices like Right Research and likes? Abhay, we have very less, carefully handpicked quality advisors, and Right Research is one of them. So one thing which probably we are focusing at Welldesk is to have limit. So when there are 50 mutual funds of the same scheme, you're always confused ki Axis le, ICICI le, HDFC le. Wouldn't it be our responsibility to give you the best out of the lot, be it lesser in numbers, so that you have limited choice and the best of all available? So this is where I think you should not be spoiled for choices when you are
Yes,
taking.
actually, we are already talking about 5,000, 6,000 stock universe in India. Usme, if we bring well basket from everybody and anybody in the country, then you will
It will
again get
confuse you.
analysis balance. See, the idea is we want to screen at the platform level. We want to set some standards that these are the manufacturers which can serve your entire core satellite investment objectives. If you fit to your investment goals, we take that hard decision of not having some or having some based on some very serious principles. It's like imagine when a mutual fund is launched, you see the kind of due diligence that goes, that can that portfolio handle 5,000 crores, can that portfolio sustain for 10 years as a theme, can that portfolio be complied or from an FI investment point. I mean, thousands of things. Like imagine if we do all that for direct equities ETF based portfolio. We try to do all of that. You see, our background makes us do all of that, and as a platform we are trying to make it more technology driven so that we can provide that all to you at a very low cost. And some of the things these are very close to our heart. It is not just about numbers, getting as many greens and the whites of the world to make available to you. That's not the goal. The goal is to find the best of the lot, bring that to you as a retail investor, and push the product ecosystem to a level where you can serve your investment objectives without any challenge.
Great. One question from Vedika is that what is your view on robo advisors versus human advisors? Let me answer this, Ujjwal. So because I have been on the both places, so probably I can take this question. So what happens, guys? When I was doing the HNI wealth management at Edelweiss, there was a need of human, right? And that is sometimes they just need to crib out. They just need every single small help. I mean, these are guys who are 5 crores, 50 crores, 100 crores worth guys. And they are not going to log into the system and putting in their passwords and then seeing how the portfolio is happening. What they'll do is they'll just pick up the phone. Weber, why is the market down today? And Weber has to answer because he's paying the fee. What I've observed in the industry in the last 2 3 years since the time with my Edelweiss stint was that all these HNIs will always need that human, kind of support, human assistance. Maybe these big companies for the HNIs will actually use tech so Edelweiss is a great tech platform. We use tech in order to advise to all these guys, but human interface is very much necessary. But when you go down to the mass affluent of the retail class, many times companies like Edelweiss, IIFL, and all these guys will not find it feasible to provide a single individual to each and every person who is putting in a 20, 25 lakh or even a 10 lakh rupees ticket size. This is where robo advisory comes into play. And more customized robo advisory will come into play. More robo advisory will go up and more equity penetration or wealth management penetration in India will happen. So I would not say that human advisors are going to go out of the fashion. They will always continue. They will have a place, and one of the most lucrative and money making careers is HNI wealth management. If you're good at sales, if you're good at relationship management, you are at the right place. But I thought at this age, at 30s, I should look forward and see how to actually cater a difference in the audience at large. So that's my viewpoint on this. Couple of last questions. Ujjwal, do you have any idea for Python? I mean, which is the best course in the Python in the market today? I do not have, because Coursera
So,
and
so
Udemy has a
one
lot.
thing, so I've been not that close to like generally the course universe right now, but they are fun. They are very basic things when you look at any courses. One is that a course which is free is gonna be the best course. That is given. It don't look for paid courses anywhere. So that is fundamental. So when it comes to free courses, I think Coursera has been good. Like when I was doing some lot of these online courses back in 2010, 11. But today I think Coursera and there's this. Udemy, they have really good courses. And I used to, long back I used to really enjoy Contopian. It's a Boston based company. They are pioneers in actually building Con based Python tools and libraries, and they have a very used to have a very vibrant blog community to start with your first Python scripts and all as a finance guy. So just check that, but look for courses which are like low cost or almost free on Coursera, Udemy for finance. So as a finance guy, the focus should be not more tech driven like website building or any of that. Should be more around data. So look for courses which has keywords like data analytics, data science, which will talk more about Python data structures like pandas. Pandas as a data frame is like as good as an Excel sheet. So imagine a pandas library in Python is equal to an Excel sheet that you see on your screen. So imagine that you can do anything using your program functions. So these things you will get exposed to, and you will eventually get comfortable with all of that. So look for courses which are around data analytics, because they are meant for actually people from non computer science background or non engineering background, so that they can gradually build on top of that. So yeah, so I specific courses name I don't have, sorry. I mean, I've been out of touch for a while.
I think no problem. I think we should wrap it up here. Guys, whosoever is remaining in the call, very sorry for today, whatever happened, but next time we'll ensure that we can admit as many people as possible. And as I said, that we are going to change whatever webinar series I've been having fortnightly right from January. Now, what I'll do is I'll always bring a guest speaker. Today, we started off with Ujjwal because there were questions around Welldesk and all these things. But from next time, I'll try to call in the sector experts. I'll try to call in some fund managers. I'll try to call in some macro guys, some Python experts. So it's always going to be like a 1.5 hour session with 30, 40 minutes. I'm speaking my whatever I want to speak to you guys, and then probably have a 45 to 50 minutes Q&A and a session from the guest speaker. I think this should work well, and you will have a diverse topic because I can't know everything. I'll also get someone from cryptocurrency, crypto world, an expert from there in coming weeks. So stay tuned. We are also, kind of making some kind of mechanism where you can register and can get to know the notifications will come as to which webinar is going to happen next week or the week after that, so that you can enroll accordingly, and rather than me giving topics on Telegram channels. So with that, I think thank you everybody who joined. Thank you, Ujjwal, taking time on a Saturday.
Thank
And
you guys. Yeah, I really
startup
enjoyed
guys
talking to
work
you.
all 7 days, as I know, and I am just feeling for the last 2 weeks there's never a
Don't
holiday.
complain about it, man.
Now I know,
You are...
don't need to. So, okay, guys. Okay, all the best and take care, everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you, guys.
I'll
Bye.
share the recording soon, guys.